This is VOA News. I'm Steve Karesh. Friday evening in Washington, it was announced that President Donald Trump has approved a moderate deployment of American troops and equipment to Saudi Arabia and to the United Arab Emirates to act in a defensive role in response to attacks on Saudi oil facilities last week. Mark Esper is Secretary of Defense.
To prevent further escalation, Saudi Arabia requested international support to help protect the kingdom's critical infrastructure. The United Arab Emirates has also requested assistance. In response to the kingdom's request, the President has approved the deployment of U.S. forces, which will be defensive in nature and primarily focused on air and missile defense. We will also work to accelerate the delivery of military equipment to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the UAE to enhance their ability to defend themselves.
The United States is placing blame for last week's attack in Saudi Arabia squarely on Iran.
It is clear, based on detailed exploitation conducted by Saudi, United States, and other international investigative teams, that the weapons used in the attack were Iranian-produced and were not launched from Yemen, as was initially claimed. All indications are that Iran was responsible for the attack.
Secretary Esper said the attack represents a dramatic escalation of Iranian aggression. Tehran denies they were behind the attack. Rallies and demonstrations are taking place around the world on Friday to call for action on climate change in the run-up to a UN Climate Action Summit in New York next week. A UN report to be released is expected to conclude that global warming and pollution are devastating oceans and polar regions, raising risks for ecological devastation around the world. The Trump administration has cast doubt on broad scientific consensus that the Earth is warming and human activity is to blame. This is VOA. Iraqi security officials say the death toll in an explosion on a minibus in the Shiite holy city of Karbala has risen to 12. 5 others were injured. The officials said those killed in the explosion and subsequent fire were all civilians. There was no immediate claim of responsibility. In a report released on Friday, Hong Kong police are being accused of torture by Amnesty International. Michelle Hennessy has the story.
Hong Kong police have been accused of torture by Amnesty International. The human rights group issued a report on Friday with their conclusions from a field investigation into the months-long protests. In a statement, they said Hong Kong security forces had, quote, an apparent thirst for retaliation and were engaged in a disturbing pattern of reckless and unlawful acts. They said, quote, this has included arbitrary arrests and retaliatory violence against arrested persons in custody, some of which has amounted to torture. Responding to the report, Hong Kong police say they have respected the privacy, dignity and rights of those in custody and have used the minimum force necessary.
Michelle Hennessy reporting. U.S. President Donald Trump renewed threats to release captured Islamic State fighters on Europe's doorstep if countries there continue to refuse to take back their foreign fighters. He said that he's continuing with plans to draw down forces in Syria and that it was time for other countries to step up. Trump made the statements on Friday at the White House during a meeting with Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison.
And now we have thousands of prisoners of war, ISIS fighters that are prisoners of war, and we're asking the countries from which they came, Scott, from Europe, we're asking them to take back these prisoners of war, and they can try them, do what they want. So far, they've refused, and at some point I'm going to have to say, I'm sorry, but you either take them back or we're going to let them go at your border.
According to the latest U.S. estimates, the coalition-backed Democratic forces are holding more than 2,000 foreign fighters in northeastern Syria, along with thousands of others from Syria and Iraq. A bus carrying Chinese-speaking tourists crashed on its way to a national park in southern Utah, killing 4 people and critically injuring up to 15 others. It is not yet clear what caused the wreck. New York City Mayor Bill Deblasio has announced he is ending his campaign for the 2020 presidential nomination. The campaign struggled to gain traction in the crowded field of Democrats seeking the presidency. For more on these and other top stories, visit us online at voanews.com. I'm Steve Karesh, VOA News.